And when President Jacob Zuma decided to reshuffle his team, he was well within his rights to do so. But the move has ruffled many feathers. Amongst those unsettled are some of his own comrades in the ANC leadership. Efforts are also being made to create a false narrative around Zuma and his new ministers using fake news as a tool. But the efforts to undermine Zuma have also so far come to a zero. A perfect example being the flop shown by a Save SA March turned out to be, and is this case of unethical politics. That is our focus on the show this evening. And of course, joining us in studio is Mzwanele Manyi, the founder of the Decolonization Foundation. Good evening to you. And we have Sfiso Mtsweni, ANC Youth League NEC member in the Western Cape. Good evening to you. And you at home, you're most welcome to participate as well. I mean, there has been so much happening over the past week that I don't think we've all had a chance to catch our breath. I just want to look at the Save SA campaign, the whole mobilization around Jacob Zuma, because the broader narrative is essentially the ousting of the ANC come 2019. And yet we are so fixated on the one person. Mzwanele, again, take our viewers into your confidence to give us what it means to connect the dots exactly.
Yeah, no, look, I think Save SA is actually a community activity of the DA, of the opposition, as it were. So for it to do that, it's just a DA in another form. So it's to be expected. So I don't think it should raise any alarm. They're doing what they should be doing. It's just strategy and tactics of the DA outside the parameters of parliament, outside the parameters of formality, just to raise all these awarenesses and so on. But I think what pleased me, as somebody that supports the African National Congress, is that I think their march was poorly attended, which is a clearer sign that what they are saying does not strike a chord with the majority of our people. There's a lot of people that are unemployed, but even the unemployed thought they had better things to do than go to that misguided march of the DA, Save SA and VAVI. I think all of them put together, they just represent an agenda that seeks to entrench white monopoly capital. They represent an agenda that seeks to continue to subjugate black people, Africans in particular. They are pushing a colonial agenda, and I'm happy that South Africans have seen them for what they are, and they have not supported that call.
But what is the ANC doing in response? Because as you're saying, they're capitalizing on the factionalism, the infighting, and what we've seen from the top six in itself is very unprecedented. To come out and say, essentially, we distance ourselves from the list of ministers and deputies. What does that say? If the ANC perpetuates the success of the opposition based on party politics and domestic affairs, how then will you manage these fault lines?
No, thank you very much. I think firstly, let me pick up from what Mr. Manyi said. Save South Africa is just a bunch of CEOs, a small committee of people who thought that perhaps by speaking a lot on media and other areas, what they are saying strikes a chord with our people. What people seem to forget is that the ANC enjoys 63% support of South Africans. Everybody else that has been crying about the ANC is not the electorate of the ANC, but the people who contested the ANC during the elections. Save South Africa, as Comrade Manyi is raising quite correctly, is a representative of the DA. In fact, it's a league of the DA. Now, coming to your question, in fact, tomorrow, the ANC Youth League will be organizing one of the biggest assemblies, just from comrades of Gauteng alone, young people who are going to say to President Zuma in particular that he continues to enjoy the support of young people, continues to enjoy the support of the rank and file members of the ANC. In fact, Save South Africa tomorrow must come to Germiston and start to learn the art of mobilization, because they are just a bunch of CEOs who sit behind air-conditioned offices. They don't know what mobilization is. What they say do not strike a chord with the South Africans. So tomorrow, the ANC Youth League will be responding for the first time at this provocation that has been happening, even with the opposition party saying all these things that they are saying. indeed will be ready tomorrow, and we'll welcome President Zuma, will address us, and all the ministers that have been appointed, which we are very happy about.
I mean, but still, they're dealing with the trust deficit clearly from the top 6 in defiance, saying, you know, they didn't have a part in the list. It was formulated elsewhere, and essentially they had to rubber stamp it. This is from Gwede Mantashe and Cyril Ramaphosa, also saying that he warned against the removal of finance minister. And yet it's the year of action, or unity in action. It's the year of OR. All of those are now flying in the face of what the party intends to do.
I think what is a problem is that English is probably the 7th language to most of us. As it is. It's an English issue here that we have. The word consultation, what does it mean? Some people have understand it differently. I think that is the biggest problem. If we all understood what is the meaning of consultation, we wouldn't be having this problem. Number one, when we are being consulted, it doesn't mean that permission is being sought from you. It's very important for people to understand that, number one. Number two, when you are being consulted, it does not mean that you are seeking consensus necessarily. When you are being consulted, the person consulting you just wants to tell you that, particularly if this person has got a prerogative to make that decision, but respects you, takes you into his own confidence to say, this is what I want to do, and all that. You can say whatever you want to say in reaction to what this person is saying when you are being consulted, and this person may or may not take what you are saying into consideration. But as long as what he wanted to deliver, it's his prerogative. He has done what he needed to do in terms of consulting you. If President Zuma's agenda was just to inform, he would have sent a memo to these people to say, there's a memo, this is what I'm doing. This would have been the highest, this would be like informing them. But if you convene a meeting to have a discussion with people, to brief them about what you want to do and whatever, that is consultation. And I think to then, when you're busy consulting people, then you have one of the group of the stakeholders, like the Communist Party, that is going to decide that whatever they're being consulted upon, they are unhappy with this, that, or the other. Then they have their own press conference to rubbish a confidential briefing, as it were. That was really unbecoming, as it were. Therefore, if President Zuma did not finish his rounds of consultation, it will be because the SACP decided that they're going to just divulge everything. And by the way, I think it has now come to light that even the reason that the SACP is citing as the only reason, we now know, following the briefing by the chairperson of the ANC, that in fact this intelligence report was just one of the things that President Zuma went to town to detail a lot of issues pertaining to the former Minister of Finance. And now for the SACP to just pick one of the issues and rally with it, it's actually being propagandist and a misinformation campaign which they have done. And we're sitting here with the situation that we have now of junk status. I think people that must pay for this is the SACP. Is responsible for this because they have sent a message of divergence, as it were, number one. Number two, these Save South Africa people that have been everywhere saying that there's going to be chaos and whatever, these are the people that we should look to in terms of the chaos, in terms of the this junk status creating.
Yeah, but how does the ANC continue, though, under these circumstances? As you've said, you know, the rubbishing of the so-called intelligence report and the top 6 washing their hands off Zuma's decision, essentially isolating it. You know, it's widely reported that he finds himself in a corner with very few allies to go to.
Well, I think firstly, you made a point earlier about this being a year of OR term. Now, if you go back to history, Comrade Man, you know that in Morocco, for instance, that conference was necessitated by a lot of divergent views in the ANC. What we are seeing here today is not strange. The ANC has always been an organization that understands that it's got divergent views inside. Hence, we speak about unity in diversity. Now, unfortunately, normally in the ANC, these divergent views are what we discuss internally. And what gets resolved out there is what gets communicated. Now, in this case, you had an unprecedented situation where 2 or 3 members of the officials, because the narrative that is out there is as if it's the officials. different members of the top 6 structure have expressed a view on this issue. Comrade Jesse Duarte, for instance, has said that the president has consulted. Comrade, the national chairperson, who chairs, by the way, those particular meetings, has come out to say that there was consultation. And I want to agree with Comrade Manye that perhaps the issue of consultation is what we don't understand here. But I think we are encouraged that today the officials of the ANC have met. They are still in a meeting. The National Working Committee of the ANC, which has been extended tomorrow to include provincial chairs and secretaries, will take place so that we rediscover that unity of purpose. But from where we are sitting, particularly as the Youth League, we think that the president has done a very good job. We welcome particularly the injection of young people into the cabinet. Comrade Malusi Gigawa in particular is a former president of the ANC Youth League. He is more experienced in cabinet than Pravin Gordhan for that matter, which is something that society is not aware of. Pravin Gordhan only joined cabinet in 2009. Pravin Gordhan has got a background of being a pharmacist and not necessarily from the financial markets. Yet he was welcomed by the markets and so on. Where else, Comrade Gigawa, by the way, who has a master's degree in public policy and has been a minister of public enterprises, has got more experience that can steer the country forward. So there's no crisis. The ANC will find itself again and it will move forward.
I just want to go back to the backlash that we saw with Save SA and Black Monday, with many saying, primarily black contributors, saying don't take for granted our discontent, disenchantment with President Zuma and try and equate it to the agenda that you're trying to push. Because whether we like it or not, we still polarize. And the fact that regime change needs to effect transformation. Do you think that under Gordhan's watch, the paralysis would have continued as widely suggested by ANC and structures like yourself?
Yeah, most definitely. I think it's important to look at what is objective information. The objective information is the issue of the repeal of the PPPFA. Now, PPPFA is one of those policies that continues to empower white monopoly capital and at the same time impoverishing black business, as it were. You have the NGC of the ANC resolving that this thing must be reviewed. As we sit here and now, we still hear all kinds of things about the review of this thing. There's all kinds of manipulations and playing around the regulations, but we're not hearing what is happening on the act itself, which is where the problem is. So in terms of the former finance minister, from where I sit, I think he's been moving at a snail pace in terms of effecting radical economic transformation, even within the approved fiscal policy that we have. And the current Minister of Finance now, with the kinds of pronouncements he has made, we think he has made very responsible pronouncements, because he is still going to stay within the parameters of the fiscal constraints, but is going to push radical economic transformation, something which is possible even within these constraints. So we think the chance to achieve the objectives of the ANC, the chance to achieve the objectives of South Africa, to ensure that we have an equal society, are much better with this finance minister who has more energy, who is more in touch with the realities of the majority of the population of this country, which require empowerment, which require growth, inclusive growth. We cannot have a situation in South Africa where when we talk about growth, we are told that first we must grow the cake, then share. No, we don't want to wait. We don't want to be treated like children, where others must grow and others come in later. We want to be part of that growth. When we say inclusive growth, it means everybody's shoulder must be on the wheel. We want participation to grow the economy together. We don't want to be spectators. And I think the current minister understands that very well, understands that we need to change the structure of the economy. It is unsustainable to have a JSE, which is 15 trillion, that is only 3% black owned. It is unsustainable that all the top positions in the country are occupied 70% by white people in a country that is 80% black. This is unsustainable. We cannot have a situation like this.
Yeah, but you also can't ignore the allure of the lies and fake news and what the side shows in the periphery, that essentially Malusi is there as part of the dots to sign a deal, nuclear deal, that would largely benefit the Guptas and erode the state coffers. And you know the rest. So South Africans obviously would need to have a sense of confidence that this minister is above board, and the intentions from the ANC president, or President Jacob Zuma, is to allow for that growth of inclusive economy where we can all share in the spoils.
No, look, I think firstly we must acknowledge the fact that mainstream media in South Africa is quite desperate in its agenda to overthrow a democratically elected government. I mean, to even go to an extent of following tweets and Facebook comments of a discredited person who's bitter that she was removed from the cabinet of this country, was removed out of parliament, a person who lives every day in social media to rant, and a person who's clearly not of sound mental status. For the media of this country to take that particular person so seriously, to a point that they can even print and show on their television channels that there's a nuclear deal that has been signed. How could Comrade Gigaba come into a department without even knowing where his office is, without even the names on the door changing, and has already signed a nuclear deal? I think that is nonsense. But I think one of the things that really we must make it very clear. Comrade Malusi Gigaba is not somebody who's parachuting out of the sky. He's a person who has been part and parcel of this particular government. He has been part and parcel of Comrade Thabo Mbeki's government. He has been in the National Executive Committee of the ANC for 21 years. So this is not a mafigizol or a fly-by-night. This is a person who understands ANC policy. He's a person that understands what needs to be done in Treasury. He's a person who understands that there are NGC resolutions, there are Congress resolutions around radical economic transformation that need to take place. And from where we are sitting, we've got full confidence in him. We are not going to be distracted by issues of nuclear deals and so on.
Yeah, but I think it is important to understand that South Africa has got an approved energy mix situation. So we've got these independent power producers that at some point must join into the mainstream of the energy generation. In the State of the Nation address, nuclear is mentioned there by the president. So therefore, there should be no hoo-ha about South Africa going into nuclear. South Africa has pronounced that it will indeed do nuclear as and when it is affordable. So I think this whole hula baloo about nuclear is totally unwarranted. Because are we going to go to nuclear? For sure, South Africa will go into nuclear. Will South Africa go into nuclear even if it doesn't afford it? No. South Africa has already pronounced on this matter, so it's not clear what is this silly agenda that people are pushing.
Yeah, but under the conditions, though, you must remember the elective conference. There's also 2019, which is very critical in terms of who retains power, how much the ANC is going to shed, because you have the view that the ANC will still be in national governance. But as a build-up to that, is there an adequate strategy in place? Do you find that even disgruntled members would be persuaded differently based on what their demands had been, i.e., be it leadership change or be it to transform policy, etc.?
Look, I think, firstly, there's a consultative conference of the ANC that will take place in conjunction with the policy conference of the ANC. Part of what the consultative conference of the ANC will do is that members of the ANC across the country will come and talk to each other and really say that as members of the ANC, how do we take the ANC forward? Because you see, here's another issue that South Africans need to understand. South African democracy is one of the most successful democracies in the African continent. Now, after 20 years of liberation, you know that a lot of liberation organizations across the continent face challenges of this particular nature. So the ANC itself is not immune from the challenges which arise out of what we call the sins of incumbency. You know, the fact that we're in government, the membership that you attract today is not necessarily the same as the membership that would have joined the ANC pre-1994. So the ANC from time to time would meet and talk to each other and see how to strengthen the organization. But I think one thing that we need to accept this year, since it's a conference year, some comrades are beginning to posture themselves. They'll run around, talk to all media houses in order to try and persuade branches of the ANC to consider them. But one thing I can tell you is that there will be a national conference in December. Branches of the ANC will elect a leadership. From there, the ANC will unite, because in 2019, we've got an election. And I think one thing that we must dismiss right here is this thing that ANC is going to lose power in 2019. And it remains the argument of the ANC Youth League that that particular argument cannot be based on what has happened in the metros, because metros and local government elections have got their own dynamics. In the bigger scheme of things, at the national level, the ANC continues to enjoy the support of the majority. Just 2 days ago, in conclusion, the president was in Pietermaritzburg launching the biggest housing project that this country has ever seen. Comrade President Zuma continues to be loved by the poor in this country. He continues to enjoy the support of the majority.
I'm going to have to cut you, sorry, very briefly, Zonele. When they say the ANC Aisafani, what's your response?
Yeah, well, indeed, Safan, it is much bigger now. The ANC, for the first time in its life, has now got over 1 million members, as it were. Indeed, ANC is much bigger and better. It's much more organized, it's much more dynamic, there's much more robust engagement. Indeed, it is a much better organization. I think what is silly about that agenda is a situation where ANC is supposed to be locked into the thinking of 1932. ANC is an organic organization. ANC grows and keeps on responding to material conditions on the ground, and therefore ANC has got to be relevant for the time. We cannot have an ANC of 1914, of 1912 in 2017. We have to have ANC of 2017 to respond to 2017 issues.
All right, gentlemen. Thank